Brazil meets the Sheik. The next time I woke up, it was just starting to get light, and somehow I was in the front seat and Mama was in the back. When my eyes got used to where they were, I saw Dad holding the steering wheel with one hand and resting his other one on the mirror outside the car. The green lights from the dashboard made his face look puffed up and tired, but he was smiling to himself. I knew what woke me up this time. The Ultraglide was stuck. As we drove, the record was saying, "And don't forget who's tick, and don't forget who's tick, and don't forget who's tick, and don't forget who's tick." I started to say something to Dad, but he looked pretty happy, and before I could open my mouth, the record hypnotized me back to sleep. The next time I woke up, it was bright day, and Joy was in the front seat drooling all over me. The Ultraglide was still playing, and don't forget who's tick. Dad must have heard me breathe different because he looked down at me and said, "Well, well, well, look who's decided to come back to life." "Hi, Dad. Are we there yet?" "Oh, no. Et tu, Brute? You were my last hope, with Vi and Joey and your mother popping up every few minutes asking, 'Are we there yet?' It's been like a stuck record." "Dad, it is a stuck record." Dad seemed to notice the record player for the first time. "Ah, that. Well, Kenny, I'm afraid it's more than a stuck record. Something isn't working right." He lifted the arm off the record and looked in the back seat at Mama, who was asleep. "Well, let's keep that between you and me, okay?" "Sure. How long before we stop?" "We'll be at Grandma Sands before you know it." Joey had been listening to us. "Daddy, that's what you said the last time. How much longer? I'm sick of this old car." "Not too much longer, honey. I'll stay up and keep you company, Dad," I said. "Yeah, me too," Joey added. I don't know who conked out first. I didn't remember anything about coming into Alabama. I didn't think any of us did, especially Dad. We'd been in the car so long that Dad had started growing a beard. Little tiny hairs were coming out of his face. Most of them were black, but 9 or 10 of them were white. Dad was looking real bad. He was still smiling to himself, but now instead of a real smile, it looked like he was gripping his teeth together to get ready to bite something. The worst thing, though, was that he turned the radio on and was listening to country and western music. He was even tapping his hand on the steering wheel like he was really enjoying it. "Dad, do you know what you're listening to?" Dad decided to cut up. "Kenneth, I've been thinking about having all our names changed to country names when we get back to Michigan. I'll be Clem, you'll be Homer, Bob will be Billy Bob, Joey will be Daisy May, and your mother will be, well, I guess your mother's name can just stay Walona. I don't think we're going to find a more country name than that one, do you?" Me and Dad cracked up. Mama's head popped up from the back seat and she said in a super southern style, "Okay, Clem, I hopes when us get to Birmingham you can explain to these here babies, Granny, how come you turned them into little zombies from sitting in this car so long." Dad laughed. "Now, Alona, you know it hasn't been that bad. In fact, I'm going to admit to something that I probably shouldn't." Mama rubbed her eyes, then put her hand on top of my head. "You going to do this here admitting in front of the little Homer here?" Everybody started waking up and stretching and scratching. Mama kept teasing Dad. "And what about some vitals, Clem? The sun been up for hours and you ain't even been out to check them trampolines to see if we're going to have some cool pie for breakfast." Dad yelled out, "Yeehaw!" and then said, "Haven't any of you wondered why you've been sleeping like a little herd of angels?" Byron said, like there was anything to keep anybody awake in this car full of squares. "Anyway," Dad said, "I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag. I've been using two kinds of mind power to keep this trip going so smooth. First, after a while, I started locking into the road, and there was nothing to it. Just me, the road, and the brown bomber, all turned in one hum. And as long as I listened to that hum, everything was fine. My biggest worry was you, Lona. I knew after a while you figured out that I wasn't going to stop, and you gotta admit, you were good and salty about it first, right?" "You know I still am." Mama was upset because all of her notebook planning had been wasted. "But Bologna, you got to admit that once you figured out how much money we'd saved by not stopping, you went along with it." Mama kind of grunted, not saying yes and not saying no. Dad cleared his throat and rubbed his hand over the little stubbles that were coming out of his chin. We all knew this was a sign that he was going to start acting the fool. He tested Mama to see how mad she really was and decided it was safe to play around. "Yep," he said, rubbing his chin until it made a scratchy sawing sound. 18 big hours in a row. Nearly 1,000 miles. Had a load to deliver, and he punched the air with his fist. I delivered it. It's just like this great song I heard a couple of miles back. Big Daddy was a truck driving man. I'm not gonna lie and say it was easy, huh? Uh-huh. There was many a time I wanted to stop, but when those times came, I just think of my old pal Joe Espinosa driving all the way to Texas without stopping, and I keep my foot in that tank." Oh, yeah, there were times when your mother was giving me looks like she was going to kill me the first time I slowed down. I just kept smiling at her and kept the brown bomber chugging on. I tell her, "You're right, sweetheart. We'll just go a little bit farther." And you kids, you talk about some pathetic, tortured looking little faces. 18 hours in a car can age a kid 40 years. Yeah, I swear I've been looking in the rearview mirror and wondering where my babies were and where all these three bad disposition, sour faced, middle aged midgets came from. But your sorry little mugs couldn't stop me either. In spite of all the crying and bawling and moaning and wailing and gnashing of teeth, I kept pushing on. Dad must have been real tired. He hardly ever talked this much straight. I got to admit to the other trick I used too. I can't take full credit for this one. I hoped Dad was going to say that I helped him by keeping him company, but no, some of the credit has to go to Scientific Popular. That was the name of a magazine that came to Dad in the mail every month. It had a real cool had real cool covers. There were always drawings of smiling white people on it standing next to cars with wings, or sitting in private submarines, or eating a whole meal in one little pill. The covers were real interesting, but the insides were real boring. Yep, good old Scientific Popular. They had an article about sound frequencies and said that certain sounds cause certain effects in all living things, even weird Watsons. It said that sound of one of those vacuum cleaners can put a baby to sleep, and it works. Mama laughed a little. It was strange for all of us to see Dad talking so much. When we first hit Alabama and had a bunch of miles to go, and you kids were popping up like prairie dogs and crying and saying, "How much longer?" and mommy make him stop. And is that Birmingham over there? All I did was use that vacuum trick. I started buzzing like a Hoover vacuum, and you guys dropped off in reverse seniority. First Joey dropped, then Kenneth, then Daddy Cool, then even you, Alona. Shoot, you guys were out cold from the state line on. I threw a blanket over you in the back seat, and then even those whines and whimpers and moans you guys were making didn't bother me. And you, Alona, once I got buzzing, the only thing that was coming out of your mouth was drool. Is that what that sound was? Mama asked. I thought you were driving so long you lost your mind. I'm still not sure you haven't. Everybody woke up, but it was a fake wake up. We were all soon back to sleep, and even though it was morning. The next thing I remember, I was waking up back in the back seat, and Mama was saying real southern, "Babies, we're home." Mama was honking the horn of the brown bomber like she was crazy. I raised my head out of the seat to look at what Mama was calling home, and couldn't believe it. Birmingham looked a lot like Flint. There were real houses, not little log cabins all over the place, and great big beautiful trees. Most of all, though, there was the sun. Me, Joetta, and Byron unfolded ourselves into the Alabama heat, and it was like we all remembered at once that we were going to finally see what Grandma Sands really looked like. We all bunched up together by Mama's door, but she didn't get out. She was still honking the horn like a nut. We had to cover our ears. Dad said, "Nothing's changed." The door of a regular little old house opened. Me and Joey had never seen Grandma Sands in our lives. Byron said he could remember that she was the meanest, ugliest person in the world, but he was probably lying. He was only 4 the last time Mama and Dad were here. Byron said he'd had nightmares for a couple of weeks and after they left Alabama 10 years ago. All the real Watsons had real good imaginations, but none of us was ready for what came out of the door of that house. I was expecting a troll. I thought Grandma Sands would be bigger than Dad. I thought she'd be foaming at the mouth like she had rabies. I remember a couple of years ago how Mama had cried and cried when someone called from Alabama and told us that Grandma Sands had a little stroke. So I knew she walked with a cane now. I'd imagined the cane would be as big as a trunk, with crows and owls and lizards living in it. What came out was a teeny weeny old woman that looked just like Mama. That looked just like Mama would if someone shrank her down about 5 sizes, sucked all the juice out of her. Grandma Sands waved a little skinny stick in the air and said, "What are you all doing here today? You ain't supposed to be here till Monday. Man, if you think Mama can talk Southern style, you should hear Grandma Sands." Mama was blubbering and smiling and covering her mouth with both hands and ran right up on the porch and nearly broke that little old woman in half. "How you doing, Mama?" She cried on the woman's shoulder, then held Grandma Sands out to look at her. "You look so good." Boy, Mama can lie when she wants to. "Y'all come on over here and give your granny a hug," my Southern style mother said. Me and Joey and Byron shuffled over in a little crowd, and when we got through pushing each other forward, I was at the front and had to go on the porch to hug Grandma Sands first. I tried to be real careful with her. She was just a little taller than me and skinnier than anything I'd ever seen alive. I could see her brown scalp right through her curly silver hair. Grandma Sands squeezed me hard and cried all over me. She wiped a bunch of tears away with a twisted up hand and blinked a couple of times before she looked at me. She was so short she didn't even have to look down. She tried to say something, but she couldn't talk. She just stuck her bottom lip up. She just stuck her bottom lip out some and nodded her head up and down a couple of times, then pulled me back to her and squeezed me like crazy. Mama slapped the back of my head and said, "Kenneth Bernard Watson, you'd best quit acting so silly and give your grandmother a good hug." I squeezed her a little. It smelled like it smelled like baby powder came out of her when I did. I really think I could feel her lungs when I touched her back. I don't know what got Joey started, but she was off to the races with her tears. She was the only one who practiced what she'd say to Grandma Sands. She sniffled a couple of times, then said, "Hi, Grandma Sands. It's a real pleasure to meet you." You could only half understand what she was saying. She was blubbering so much. Grandma Sands matched Joey tear for tear. They squeezed each other for a while, then Grandma Sands got her little squeaky voice back and said to Mama, "Lord Lona, if this child ain't you, look at this baby, just as pretty and sweet as you." Mama and Joey grinned like two nuts. Byron was next. This was what I dreamed about. These two were the meanest, most evil people I'd known, and I knew only one of them was going to come out of this alive. There was going to be a battle, something like if Godzilla met King Kong, or if Frankenstein met Dracula, or like when champion wrestler Bob Brazil meets the Sheik. I'd imagine that a week or two after we got back to Flint, we'd get a phone call from Alabama with the winner of the big battle on the other end. If it was Byron, he'd talk kind of cool and low out of the corner of his mouth and say, "Shoot, man, you better come get this old chick. I ate her alive." If Grandma Sands won the battle, we'd have to hold the phone away from our ear while she shouted, "Lona, you call this a bad child? This little saint is ready to come back north and go to Sunday school and scrub all y'all's floors." But as soon as I saw Grandma Sands, I knew that Vi would destroy this poor old woman. I was even afraid Mama might decide not to leave him in Alabama. Byron walked up on the porch and real cool and kind of bent over to give Grandma Sands a hug. Grandma Sands squeezed him hard. "Lorna, what you teach these babies up north? Don't they know how to give no one a proper hug?" She held Byron by the arms and looked at him from the top to bottom. "You grew up to be a fine-looking boy. You were so puny when you was born, you nearly worried us crazy. Got so strong, too." She slapped Byron's arm, and he kind of laughed. Grandma Sands reached up and ran her wrinkly old hand over Byron's head. "A little short on hair, but we're going to get along just fine. What you think, By?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good, good. See, there's lots of things you could do down here. Mr. Robert ain't as much help as he used to be, so all them things he used to do, you can do now." Mama said, "Who? Mr. Who?" Dad came up on the porch and got a ton of hugs and tears, too. Then Grandma Sands pulled everybody together. Her little arms could only get around one person at a time, but as the weird Watson stood there with some of us laughing, some of us crying, some of us looking cool, it felt like we were all wrapped up in a big ball. Grandma Sands kept smiling. "My family, my beautiful, beautiful family," except with that southern style accent and all the weeping, it sounded like she was saying, "My family." Finally, the crowd started breaking up, and Grandma Sands said, now what am I going to feed y'all? I wasn't expecting you till Monday. Me and Mr. Robert usually just has leftovers on Sundays, but I guess if I'll go down to Joe's and pick up some things, we can have chicken tonight. You get a following directions, Byron?" "Huh?" Byron's face twisted up. "What?" Grandma Sands' voice popped like one of those big brown grocery bags being snapped open. Byron looked surprised and said, "Huh, ma'am? You get it following directions? Joe's is a good little walk." I said, "He can follow directions real good, Grandma Sands. He's not as dumb as he looks." I shut up real quick and wished I hadn't said anything when Grandma Sands looked at me and said, "Lona, maybe there's two who should be spending the summer down here with their granny." Everybody started to go inside the ugly little house. Mama sounded worried. "Mama, who is Mr. Robert?" Grandma Sands laughed just like the Wicked Witch of the West and said, "Honey, we got to talk. You just be patient. As soon he's get up, as soon as he gets up, soon as he gets up, I want all of y'all to meet him." "Soon as he gets up." "Oh, Mama." Mama sounded real upset and disappointed in Southern, but not as disappointed as me. The way Byron kept his head down and was smiling and saying yes, ma'am, this and no, ma'am, that, it looked like he had surrendered before the first punch was thrown. Instead of King Kong and Godzilla, it was like King Kong and Bambi. Instead of Bozo Brazil and the Sheik, it was like Bozo Brazil and Captain Kangaroo. Instead of Dracula and Frankenstein, it was like Dracula and Giraffe, and Byron was all neck. He knew exactly what I was thinking. After Grandma Sands gave us directions, Byron looked at me sideways and said, "What the heck you staring at?" I just shook my head. "What you expect, By ass? You seen her. That bird's as old as dirt. She's so old I bet she used to step over dinosaur turds. I ain't going to have her death on my hands." I knew that was a lie. It seemed like all of the fight was out of Byron, and we'd only been in Birmingham for a couple of minutes.